A very warm welcome back to GlobeTrotting. Be sure to subscribe if you're new. The Airbus A350 entered service with Qatar Airways in January 2015, and since then, it has cemented its role as an industry leader in the wide-body scene. But how can Airbus continue cementing the A350's legacy? Is that in the form of a once discussed, stretched, dubbed the A350-2000? And would it be the manufacturer's next aircraft? Or is the A350-2000 simply of no interest for Airbus as the mid-2020s now rapidly approach, all thanks to an industry that is continuing to evolve? What is the A350-2000? Well, it would be the largest A350 variant, and yes, even larger than the A350-1000 that is already existing. We know the Dash 1000 can accommodate up to 400 passengers, even more than that, and it's considered the optimal and far more efficient replacement to aircraft such as the A340-600 and the 777-300ER. An A350-2000 would look to address even further capacity concerns outlined by airlines who potentially would be looking to replace maybe their A380s. Such a proposed stretch, or Dash 2000, does have some backing behind it, and I head back to the mid-2010s. However, unfortunately, no movement has really occurred on the front of this aircraft since. If progressed with, the type would likely be 4 extra meters long, and able to seat up to 50 additional passengers, boosting revenues and customer opportunities. According to analysts, despite the additional length and weight, great optimization wouldn't be required, and standard Rolls-Royce engines could still be applied. This would mean that the overall expenses required to make this thing happen, while obviously would be there, wouldn't be on the scale of, say, a clean sheet that may look to replace the A380. Despite the logic that may have been present surrounding this A350-2000, a decision on the aircraft has not come to fruition, and Airbus has really reaffirmed its stance, and that is that it is focusing on all currently available variants in the family. This includes the specialized A350-1000 ULR, which was only recently announced to be a slightly modified Dash 1000, and it is going to be used for Qantas's Project Sunrise flights, and on top of that, Airbus is also progressing with an A350 freighter, which is the manufacturer's genuine attempts at taking market share away from Boeing in a sector that the American plane maker has long dominated. So as a result, while an A350-2000 was once discussed now nearly a decade ago, Airbus has moved ahead with other variants, while also focusing on existing ones and branching out its customer base. Would an A350-2000 end the A380 and actually form a true replacement for it? An important question when looking at the purpose of the Dash 2000. With Airbus committing to ending the A380 program at the end of the 2010s and production ceasing only a few years later, there have obviously been question marks on how airlines will replace the aircraft. No, the A380 doesn't have 2,000 currently active units, but it still has a role with airlines industry-wide. Ultimately, there is no other super jumbo on the market, so therefore you're only ever going to be looking at 2 high-capacity options to replace the A380 in terms of what it can do from a passenger capability standpoint. That is the existing A350-1000 and the 777-9. The latter remains uncertified, but many have argued that an A350-2000 could give a genuine replacement to a customer like Emirates, whose calls for a new A380 went unanswered and is now in a position where it needs to sort out just how it is going to phase out the A380 in the next, say, 2 decades. Interestingly, all this will follow concerns involving the A350-2000 that date back to the mid-2010s. Remember, this was at a point where the A380 was still in production, and Airbus was at this point trying to push for additional sales of the type. While this would fail, concerns on the A350-2000 were that if they moved ahead with it would absolutely kill any remaining prospective hope for the A380. Airbus argued that a further enhancement would basically cancel out the Super Jumbo, and therefore the plane maker would be cannibalizing its own type. Since then, however, we know the A380 basically encountered no further interest, production ceased, and orders were cancelled. But there also has been much change across the industry, and Airbus has moved in a different direction with the program. Arguments would be made that even towards the latter stages of the 2010s, there was no longer a focus on the A350-2000 being a possibility, but rather an A350neo. While the A350 has seemingly been around now for forever, its primary competitor is one that is still emerging despite being announced in 2013, and this is in the form of the 777X. While the A350 has proved to be an aircraft that has thrived, the 777X, despite being announced well over a decade ago, is yet to fly with customers on board. The A350 and 777X, however, are pitted as competitors, and the argument has been that an A350-2000 would fend off any other emerging aircraft. But Airbus actually is pretty confident. They believe they have the market for the most part on lock. If Airbus believed through a feasibility study that there would have been enough demand to market this jet and make the modifications necessary, well, they would have proceeded with it. But they didn't, and arguably maybe economic conditions didn't help this, but the A350 has still fared quite well, and there are still more exciting projects on the horizon, which prove that there was more room to develop this program for more niche-based operations. In 2019, when speaking with the Australian Business Traveller, the Airbus CEO stated that space for a high-capacity plane, such as the A350-2000, did not exist. Seemingly, this has become now a variant that was quietly forgotten. As new technologies emerged, an A350 that is enhanced could very well be revisited, but more likely than not, based on discussions we have seen take place, that would involve new engine technologies rather than, say, an even longer stretch. But things can always change between now and then, and several exciting projects away from the A380 are currently taking place that'll really be fundamental in understanding how manufacturers choose to power their aircraft in the next 5 to 10 years, and that could eventually feed a replacement to the A350. Thanks for watching, take care, be safe, leave your thoughts down below in the comments, and I'll see you in a couple of days for your latest industry analysis.
And we'll fly.